He didn't want it anymore. Yang Yi wasn't giving up, but he really didn't have the strength to fight for it. The sword may be good, but staying alive was better. He would never exchange his life for a sword. If there was even the slightest chance, then Yang Yi would definitely not give up. But there wasn't. 12 sword cultivators, yet he'd almost lost his life just fighting the third. So how would he fight the rest? It was impossible. Yang Yi laid there on the ground while his body twitched from time to time, and blood was ceaselessly flowing out from behind him. If it wasn't for the primordial violet energy within him, he would have died from these injuries. As soon as he spoke those words, the black-robed sword cultivator turned ethereal, and then the figure vanished on the spot. Suddenly, a voice resounded in Yang Yi's head. "You did much better than I expected." Yang Yi opened his eyes, and a familiar figure was standing above him. It was a man without arms, legs, or eyes. It was the same mysterious man from beneath the Northern Sword Sect. The man grinned. "I'm quite proud of you, because you didn't choose to use those divine treasures of yours. You can use them, but you must know what is more important. You did well in that aspect." Yang Yi laughed bitterly. "They were too strong." "Of course." The man smiled. All of them were extraordinary geniuses who represented the times they lived in. So, it's very extraordinary for you to be able to surmount your realm of cultivation in battle against them. Yang Yi laughed bitterly. "Is this a test?" The man shook his head slightly. "No, you passed my test at the Northern Sword Sect. I was merely using them to find out how much of the sword I should unseal for you. Its true strength isn't something that you can control right now. If it falls into your hands, then just a ray of sword energy from it is enough to annihilate you." Yang Yi shook his head and laughed bitterly. "Am I still so weak?" The man smiled. "Not at all. It's that we are already at the peak of the world, and there's quite a distance between you and us." Yang Yi gazed at him. "Senior, are you dead?" The man nodded. "Yes." Yang Yi asked, "How?" Yang Yi was puzzled. Because martial ancestor Wu and this man were very, very terrifying existences, yet all of them were dead. Who killed them? The man smiled. "You'll find out in the future." Yang Yi laughed bitterly. The man continued, "If you use everything you have, killing a 3-world realm expert isn't difficult for you. But if you encounter a 4-world realm expert, your current strength is no match for an expert at that level." Yang Yi was stunned and said, "Senior, I killed him just now." The man shook his head. "Don't forget that wasn't his real body." Yang Yi was speechless. The man added, "If his real body was here, you wouldn't have lasted 100 moves. Not even 100 moves." It was quite a blow to Yang Yi's confidence. 20%. Meanwhile, the man said, "Based on your current strength, I can only unseal 20% of its strength for you. 20% is enough for you." Yang Yi hesitated for a moment and said, "Senior, how about unsealing a little more?" The man chuckled. "If I do that, you'll suffer backlash from it. Besides that, don't underestimate that 20%. It will at least improve your strength by 50%. In other words, if you use that sword, you can fight a 4-world realm expert who relied on nothing more than his own efforts to attain such a realm of cultivation. As for whether you win or lose, it depends on how strong that person is." The man flicked a sword over to Yang Yi while he spoke. The sword was over 1 m long, completely translucent like it was made of glass, but its blade had a very striking wisp of blood red. It was blood. Besides that, its tip was chipped off at the side. The man said, "Very few have ever seen this sword for themselves, and the portraits of it in the outside world were merely drawn based on the imagination of people. Of course, there is something true about them, and it's that this sword really has a chipped tip." Yang Yi asked, "Is it because destiny feared it and removed a part of its tip?" The man shook his head and smiled. "You believe what people say?" Yang Yi asked. "Then why?" He was quite curious about why the sword's tip was chipped. The man grinned. "Its tip is chipped because it did it to itself." He gazed at the sword with a wisp of complicated emotions in his eyes. "An edge with no end. That is its Tao. Its own Tao." Yang Yi was stunned, and then he couldn't help but ask, "A sword can have its own Tao?" The man nodded. "Everything in this world has its own Tao. This sword's Tao is an edge with no end. It means exactly that its edge is without an end. That's why it became the #1 sword of the eternal universe all those years ago. It attained the Tao and rose to prominence." Yang Yi gazed at the sword, hesitated for a moment, and then took it in his grasp. The sword trembled slightly but didn't resist him. As he held it, Yang Yi had quite a strange feeling. It was like something had sealed the sword's strength, causing it to be unable to be fully released. Obviously, it was the man's doing. The man gazed at Yang Yi and nodded slightly. "As I expected, it doesn't hate you. Remember that no matter how strong a sword is, it isn't our own strength. Our own strength is true strength. If you aren't strong, even the best treasure would be meaningless. You can use external sources of strength, but you must remember that you are most important. You must always carefully remember what is primary and what is secondary." Yang Yi cupped his fist to the man and said, "Thank you for your guidance." He hesitated for a moment and asked, "Senior, is this sword a divine treasure?" The man smiled. "It's beyond that. A supreme divine treasure. There are no more than 5 such weapons throughout eternal universe, and even I have only seen 3. Yang Yi frowned slightly. "Supreme divine treasure? What is the criteria to be considered that?" "The Tao." The man said, "If a divine treasure possesses its own Tao, a true grand Tao, then it will be a supreme divine treasure. At that time, it can't be described as just a divine treasure. Such existences are very rare. Not to mention them, such existences are rare even among human cultivators. Transcend yourself and attain the grand Tao." He gazed at Yang Yi and continued, "You are already showing signs of that." "Me?" Yang Yi was slightly stunned and puzzled. The man smiled. "Your bloodline is changing, and if you're able to transcend yourself, you'll truly enter our circle. As far as we are concerned, people like you and the others outside are all outside our circle." "Outside the circle?" Yang Yi laughed bitterly. Simply speaking, they were ants before these seniors. It was like how he thought of ordinary people. Meanwhile, the man looked up at the sky and said, "There's not much time left. You may have things to ask, or something you're puzzled about." Yang Yi thought for a moment and said, "Senior, do you have anything to tell me?" The man glanced at Yang Yi and smiled. "Smart guy." He glanced at the sword gourd on Yang Ye's waist, and he said, "Use your flying sword to attack me." A sword howl resounded, and a ray of light appeared before the man's throat. However, it stopped just a few centimeters away from his throat and couldn't move an inch further, because 2 fingers had clamped down on it. Yang Yi was stunned speechless. The man used a little strength, and the sword immediately flew back to Yang Yi. Yang Yi put it away and bowed to the man. "Please provide me with your guidance." The man said, "Based on your current strength and cultivation, your flying sword combined with your sword domain is very fast. However, it can be faster. Since you can use the strength of the sword domain, why can't you use the strength of all things? Everything like the 5 elements, space, time, every type of matter, they can all be used." "The 5 elements? Space, time?" Yang Yi was stunned and asked, "They can?" The man smiled. "You should have mastered them in the past. However, when you grew stronger and gained mastery over even more powerful forms of energy, they were gradually forgotten. Actually, all of them aren't weak, and it just depends on how you use them. Of course, there are some other energies, laws, and techniques that are more formidable. But they aren't things that you can master right now." Yang Yi nodded. "I understand." The man looked up again, hesitated for a moment and said, "With that sprite progenitor by your side, your troubles may be endless." Yang Yi smiled. "It's fine. We sword cultivators do not cause trouble. But we aren't afraid of trouble either." The man roared with laughter. "Well said. Very good indeed. To be honest, I really like you. This is how sword cultivators should be. Breaking is better than bending, and just fight if necessary. Ha ha." As he roared with laughter, his figure gradually turned ethereal and vanished. Only Yang Yi remained. Once the man vanished, the surroundings became normal once more. Deep below the ground, Yang Yi glanced at the surroundings and sat down cross-legged. Recuperate. His injuries were extremely serious, and even an ordinary limit-breaker realm expert could kill him if he went outside right now. The sword, Executor, floated silently before Yang Yi. At the top of the mountain, more and more divine senses and auras pressed down upon a Nanjing and Jianyu. The auras were pressing down on a Nanjing and Jianyu, but the divine senses were locked on Snowy. As soon as Snowy appeared there, all the experts hiding in the shadows weren't able to stay calm anymore. The sprite progenitor. That was a future sprite progenitor. At the top of the mountain, Snowy gazed at the sky, blinked, and then held the mirror tightly. Suddenly, the clouds in the sky were torn open, and then a spear shot down from above. Its target was a Nanjing's group, and Nanjing's eyes narrowed slightly. She was just about to counterattack when Snowy appeared in front of her, and she patted the mirror in her grasp to display that she would deal with the attack. And Nanjing glanced at Snowy, and then she grabbed Snowy's tail and tossed her aside. Snowy's figure flipped repeatedly in midair. And Nanjing glanced at Snowy and said, "Be good, understand?" Snowy was completely stunned. Snowy gazed at a Nanjing and blinked to display that she was very good. And Nanjing grinned, and then she looked up at the sky. She tightened her grip on the spear and was about to attack when Sword Scroll spoke abruptly. "Let me do it!" And Nanjing gazed at Sword Scroll, and the latter waved her right hand. In an instant, the primordial pagoda suddenly left Yang Yi and shot up from deep underground and descended into Sword Scroll's grasp. As she gazed at it, she closed her eyes slowly, fell silent for a moment, and then a ray of powerful sword energy swept out from within the pagoda. In an instant, an ear-piercing sword howl resounded through the sky. Along with it, a sword shot up into the air and appeared in the clouds. In the primordial pagoda, the sky sword platform had started to tremble violently. Suddenly, Sword Scroll opened her eyes, and then she raised her hands slightly. "Appear! Hiss! 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 Hiss!" As soon as she gave the command, the entire sky was instantly covered in rays of sword energy. It was like a net that enveloped the entire sky above the sword ruins. Along with the appearance of the rays of light, countless powerful auras immediately slammed against the sword energy like sledgehammers. The sky sword platform. Sword Scroll gazed indifferently at the sky. Obstruction. She was very well aware that the sword formation couldn't annihilate them, and she was just obstructing them and buying Yang Yi time. Yang Yi needed time right now. Around 10 minutes later, a wave of powerful pressure suddenly appeared in the sky, and then a huge fist suddenly shot up from below and slammed against the rays of sword energy. Boom! The entire sky shook violently, and then countless rays of sword energy exploded apart. A long-haired man in gray robes was walking through the sky from afar. His gaze was focused on Snowy, and there was a playful smile on his face. Sword Scroll's eyes narrowed slightly. She was about to speak when a Nanjing suddenly said, "Let me do it!" Sword Scroll glanced at a Nanjing, nodded, and moved aside. Snowy appeared on Sword Scroll's shoulder, glanced at the mirror in her grasp, and felt quite helpless. She was really amazing too. Sword Scroll glanced at Snowy, shook her head and smiled. What a mischievous little fellow. Meanwhile, the long-haired man had arrived before a Nanjing and the others. He moved his gaze from Snowy and looked at a Nanjing with a smile on his face. "I'm not here for Yang Yi, and my only objective is the sprite progenitor. Give it to me and I'll leave right now. All right?" And Nanjing glanced at the long-haired man, and then her spear suddenly shot forward. A smile curled up on the corners of his mouth. "Do all the people of Eternal Border overestimate themselves like you?" He slammed his palm forward once he finished speaking. Bam! The spear stabbed against his palm. However, his palm remained completely unharmed. And Nanjing's spear had been stopped by his palm. Just like that. The man glanced at the spear, and then he frowned slightly. He was about to speak when a Nanjing suddenly appeared in front of him, and then she kicked the spear. Bang! The man was instantly blasted 3 kilometers away, and Nanjing stretched out her right hand and grabbed the spear, and then she hurled it. Hiss! The spear tore through everything in its path. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he took a step back with his right foot before slamming a punch forward. Bang! It blasted and Nanjing's spear away. Meanwhile, the man said, "Why do you possess a spear of obliteration from my desolate race?" And Nanjing's spear was a type of weapon that belonged to the desolate race. Since the ancient times, even their race hadn't been able to forge many of these spears. If they didn't possess a mine with mysterious or even they wouldn't have been able to forge even one of these spears. And Nanjing didn't answer him. She just stomped her right foot down and shot forward. An instant later, a wave of powerful energy tore through everything in front of the man. A wisp of killing intent flashed through his eyes, and then a pitch-black hook appeared in his grasp. A moment after that, he swung it forward. Hiss! The space in a huge area instantly cracked open before it. Bang! An explosion resounded, and then both the Nanjing and the man were pushed backward. And Nanjing was pushed all the way back to the mountaintop, and then she glanced at the long-haired man while she slowly clenched her right fist. Snowy glanced at a Nanjing, blinked, and then moved closer to Sword Scroll. She knew that a Nanjing was definitely furious. At this moment, she absolutely couldn't offend a Nanjing. Otherwise, a Nanjing would smack her on the butt. Only 3 people dares to smack her butt. One of them was a Nanjing, the other was Zier, and the last was Xianxia. And Nanjing suddenly vanished on the spot. The long-haired man reacted like he was facing a formidable enemy. He suddenly looked up, and then he swung the hook forward. Crack! The space in a huge area around him exploded apart, and a powerful wave of energy surged out like a tornado from within the pitch-black expanse of space. At this moment, the gazes of everyone here converged on the expanse of pitch-black space. Bang! 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 Explosions resounded incessantly from there. On the mountaintop, Sword Scroll stared at that expanse of pitch-black space. At this moment, a Nanjing was like an invincible god of war there, a true god of war. Her imposing aura was at a terrifying level. It was an imposing aura that even some 4-world realm experts couldn't possess. The long-haired man was instantly suppressed before her powerful aura. The aura and pressure coming from him weren't weak, but they were too inferior when compared to a Nanjing. Even Xianxia couldn't compete with her when it came to the strength of their auras. Jianyu spoke abruptly. "She's strong." Sword Scroll nodded. "She's very strong. If she survives, her name will definitely go down in history." Jianyu spoke softly. "Xianxia is lucky to have her." Sword Scroll nodded and looked up at the expanse of pitch-black space. And Nanjing held her spear with both hands and slammed it at the man. The imposing aura this attack carried could make the entire world collapse. Bang! A rumbling explosion resounded from within the pitch-black expanse of space, and then the long-haired man was blasted away. At the same time, the long-haired man's arm, which was holding the hook, flew up into the air. Snowy's eyes lit up when she saw this, and then she grabbed at it from afar. Hiss! The hook trembled, and then it struggled free from the hand and instantly appeared before Snowy. Snowy grabbed it and placed it behind her while blinking rapidly. She seemed like she was trying to hide the fact that she'd taken it. Sword Scroll and Jianyu exchanged glances, and then they shook their heads and smiled. They felt the little fellow was truly too cute. After pushing the man back, she was about to follow up with another attack, but a gray-robed old man suddenly appeared in front of the long-haired man. An instant later, a wave of powerful energy surged out like a torrent at a Nanjing. And Nanjing frowned slightly, and then her spear left her grasp. Bang! The pitch-black expanse of space shook violently, and then the entire surroundings shook while a Nanjing returned to the mountaintop. There was a wisp of blood on the corner of her mouth. Sword Scroll asked, "A 4-world realm expert?" And Nanjing shook her head. The old man wasn't a 4-world realm expert, and he was just at the peak of the 3-world realm. However, he possessed the strength of a 4-world realm expert because that attack had the strength to destroy 4 worlds. The old man glanced at this palm, and there was a bloody hole there. It had been pierced by a Nanjing spear just now. The old man's eyes narrowed slightly, and he was very shocked as he looked up at a Nanjing. He was halfway into the four-world realm, or it should be said that he had a 50% chance of winning even against a four-world realm expert. However, he'd been injured by the woman who was only at the limit-breaker realm. He hadn't had any advantage in that collision. He knew her natural talent wasn't inferior to anyone in his own race. The old man restrained his thoughts and glanced at the long-haired man behind him. "Third Prince, are you all right?" The long-haired man shook his head slightly. "It's nothing serious." The old man nodded, and then he gazed at a Nanjing. "You're an extraordinary genius. If you leave, you'll have a pretty good future. But if you refuse to act sensibly and stay, then I'm afraid you won't live to see tomorrow." And Nanjing glanced at Snowy, and the latter cracked a smile. After that, she looked back at the old man. "No one is allowed to touch her." Snowy was Xianxia's reverse scale, so Snowy was her reverse scale too. The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. "If that's the case, then we'll have to see how strong you are." As he spoke, he looked up at the sky. "Everyone hiding in the shadows. The two of us do not know you, but our objectives are the same. If you continue watching, it's this woman and Yang Yi who will benefit in the end. Now that Yang Yi isn't able to show himself, we should join forces and kill her. What do you think?" A moment of silence ensued, and then a voice resounded, "All right." In an instant, almost 20 powerful auras and pressures enveloped the mountaintop and in Nanjing. 3 World Realm experts, all of them were 3 World Realm experts. Some were even on the verge of being comparable to 4 World Realm experts. Meanwhile, Nanjing closed her eyes slowly, and a moment of silence ensued before she spoke abruptly. "Bring it!" As soon as she said that, bang! A black shadow shot up into the air from below while emanating a terrifying aura. Roar! A ferocious roar resounded through the sky. The martial Qilin. It was the martial Qilin which had shot up into the air. Once it appeared here, and Nanjing tapped her foot down and descended on its back. After that, she waved her right hand, and a spear descended into her grasp. She looked up at the sky, and then stomped her right foot down. Roar! The martial Qilin roared with fury and shot up into the air. Suddenly, over 20 powerful auras swept down from above. There were over 23 World Realm experts here now, and many were on the verge of attaining the 4 World Realm. So, how terrifying was the aura and pressure they emanated. Jian Yu fell silent for an instant. Suddenly, she grabbed her huge sword with both hands and shot up into the sky. She was very well aware that no matter how monstrous a Nanjing was, it was impossible for a Nanjing to fight off over 20 extraordinary experts. Only Snowy and Sword Scroll remained on the mountaintop. Sword Scroll glanced at Snowy. "Are you afraid?" Snowy blinked and quickly shook her head. Why would she be afraid? She was only a little afraid of a Nanjing and nothing else. Sword Scroll nodded, and then she shot up into the sky. She wasn't worried about Snowy. After all, the little fellow had more trump cards than anyone else. So, instead of being worried about Snowy, it was better to worry about themselves. Snowy glanced up into the sky, and then she tightened her grip on the mirror. High above in the clouds. As soon as Sword Scroll shot up there, around 10,000 swords shot up into the sky, and then they enveloped the entire area. A sword formation. A sword formation of 10,000 swords. Above the clouds, in space, and Nanjing stood on the martial Qilin's back with her spear in hand, and a wave of powerful pressure and aura kept sweeping out of her. It was growing stronger and stronger, and it seemed to be endless. Even then, she was still not strong enough to face over 23 World Realm experts. She was being fully suppressed. At this moment, Nanjing, Sword Scroll, and Jian Yu were being completely suppressed. They were facing over 20 extraordinary experts, so they didn't even have the strength to fight back and could only defend themselves. If a Nanjing's imposing aura wasn't too strong, they would have died by now. Snowy looked up at the sky from the mountaintop, and there was a wisp of worry in her eyes. While she was mischievous, she was no fool. Obviously, and Nanjing and the others were no match for these fellows. Snowy hesitated for a moment, looked down at the mountain below, and then she waved her paw lightly. Bang! A powerful aura suddenly shot up into the air, and then Oxy appeared before her. Oxy wasn't the only one. A few more powerful auras were behind him. They were the primal vicious tiger, the primal true dragon, and Arya, who was still having a Tonghulu. Snowy pointed at the sky, and then gazed at Oxy. She seemed to be asking if they were confident in their chances. Oxy glanced at the sky, and then he shot up into the air with the primordial axe of creation in his grasp. As soon as Oxy charged up into the air, the primal vicious tiger and primal true dragon refused to display any weakness and did the same. Besides Oxy, the primal true dragon and primal vicious tiger were peak 2 world realm demons. However, they were true primal demons. They could be described as being on par with humans at the 3 world realm. Ordinary primal demons wouldn't be comparable to human 3 world realm experts, but both of them were no ordinary primal demons, especially the primal true dragon. Its body was so strong then even 4 world realm experts wouldn't find it easy to injure. Besides Arya and Snowy, the primal true dragon had never feared anyone. On the mountaintop, Snowy gazed at Arya, and the latter licked her Tonghulu and said, "Big Brother Yang asked me to protect you because he still needs a little time." As she spoke, she passed the Tonghulu to Snowy. Snowy licked it and looked up at the sky with a bit of worry in them. Meanwhile, Arya spoke softly, "Don't worry. They have great endurance, so they'll last for a long time." Snowy was at a loss for words. Meanwhile, in the sky above, Oxy was the first to arrive there. He nodded slightly to a Nanjing, and then he took the axe in both hands and charged at the closed 3 world realm expert. Everywhere the axe passed as he swung it, space collapsed in an instant. The 3 world realm expert before Oxy had an extremely solemn expression on his face, and he didn't dare act carelessly at all. His figure transformed into a ray of white light that charged at Oxy. Meanwhile, the primal true dragon had returned to its true form. It blotted out the sky. Once it returned to its true form, all the experts here couldn't help but shoot a glance at it. A dragon. A primal true dragon from the primal era. Such a demon could be said to be extinct in the current era. So, they wondered where Yang Yi had found these primal demons. The primal true dragon immediately slammed its body at one of the nearby experts upon returning to its true form. It simply seemed like it could obliterate the world. That expert was horrified when the primal true dragon locked onto him, and he didn't even have room to dodge. He could only use his pseudo-divine treasure, a gray armor. It immediately erupted with a ray of dazzling black light upon being activated, and the gray light completely enveloped the expert. However, along with the impact from the primal true dragon's body, the black light exploded apart, and the pseudo-divine treasure itself collapsed in an instant while his body was blasted away. He was blasted over 10 kilometers away. After it blasted that expert away, the primal true dragon didn't follow up with another attack and swept its body in a different direction. Hiss! The entire sky exploded apart before it. Overbearing. The primal true dragon's formidable physical strength horrified all the experts here. Meanwhile, the primal vicious tiger was extremely terrifying as well. Viciousness. The primal vicious tiger was enveloped in a vicious aura, and it was fearless in battle. In the sky, while the situation here hadn't changed along with the arrival of the 3 primal demons, and Nanjing's side was in a much better situation. At the very least, they weren't being suppressed anymore. On the mountaintop, Arya glanced at the sky and spoke indifferently. "Big sister and is the most amazing. That stupid dragon is barely all right, and the little tiger and ox are a little weak. Those 2 fellows need to grow stronger or they'll be eliminated." Snowy licked the Tonghulu and nodded in agreement. Arya suddenly took the Tonghulu from Snowy and licked it before continuing. "Snowy, can I eat these fellows?" Snowy was stunned, and then she looked up at the sky. "People can be eaten? Are they tasty?" Suddenly, a one-armed man and a gray-robed old man suddenly appeared near them. Arya glanced at them and said, "What do you want?" The one-armed man gazed at Snowy and smiled. "This is the sprite progenitor? She's so cute." Snowy blinked and gazed at Arya. The latter grinned. "Don't be afraid. I'm very strong." The one-armed man gazed at her when he heard this and smiled. Is that so? Little sister, are you really very strong? Arya glanced at the old man behind the one-armed man. She didn't say anything and just licked the Tonghulu. The one-armed man gazed at Snowy and smiled. Are you going to come with me, or shall I take you by force? Snowy blinked, and then she patted Arya on the shoulder. Arya nodded, and then she appeared in front of the one-armed man before a tombstone slammed down at him. As soon as that happened, horror filled the man's heart. At this moment, his hairs were standing on end. Danger, lethal danger. At the critical moment, a hand suddenly grabbed him, and then he vanished on the spot to be replaced by the gray-robed old man instead. The gray-robed old man raised his palm and slammed it at the tombstone. Boom! As soon as his palm touched the tombstone, the old man's expression changed drastically. An instant later, his palm cracked open and blood sprayed. At the same time, his figure was blasted backward. As soon as he stopped himself, the old man's expression changed drastically once more. Don't you dare! He was about to attack when a shrill cry resounded from afar, and then the old man didn't dare to make another move. It was because the one-armed man was on the ground, and a tombstone was above him. Arya glanced at the man, and then she gazed at Snowy. Snowy, have you killed? Snowy shook her head. Arya blinked. Why don't you try? It's really fun. Fun. Snowy blinked, and then she gazed at the one-armed man and hesitated slightly. Meanwhile, Arya suddenly withdrew a dagger and passed it to Snowy. Go on. Kill him. Just aim at his throat and stab down. He'll scream and then his body will twitch. After that, he'll be dead. Snowy was stunned. Meanwhile, the old man stared at Arya. Who are you? Arya ignored the old man and pushed the dagger into Snowy's grasp. Go on. Kill him. Snowy glanced at the dagger, glanced at the one-armed man, and then leaped over to the man. After that, she covered her eyes with one paw and stabbed the dagger at the man's throat with the other paw. Yah! Along with a loud shout, Snowy shuddered and stabbed the dagger down at random. A short while later, she moved her left paw away from her eyes and glanced at the one-armed man. At this moment, the man was still looking at her, and he wasn't dead. Meanwhile, Arya spoke in a displeased tone. Snowy, can't you use a little more strength? Put your back into it. Snowy blinked, hesitated for a moment, and then she covered the man's eyes with her paw. After that, she raised the dagger in her right paw and stabbed it down forcefully. The gray-robed old man was about to attack, but Arya suddenly looked up at him. Danger! The old man sensed danger when her gaze locked onto him. The old man was extremely shocked, and he wondered who she was to make him sense danger. Arya ignored the old man and looked ahead. At this moment, Snowy had a paw over the man's eyes while she used the other paw to constantly stab the dagger at the man. Unfortunately, her stabs were too weak. The one-armed man was still a three-world realm expert, so his body wasn't something that could be damaged by someone without the slightest strength like Snowy. Snowy's stabs were like scratching an itch to the man. In the end, Arya couldn't watch anymore. She patted Snowy on the shoulder to tell Snowy that she could stop. Snowy glanced at Arya, blinked, and then gazed at the one-armed man. After that, she passed the dagger to Arya in order to display that Arya could do it herself. Arya didn't take the dagger, and she just slapped the tombstone on the one-armed man's body. Right when her palm was about to slap against the tombstone, a powerful wave of pressure appeared above her, and it was like a shocking mountain that was slamming down upon her. Arya had no choice but to stop. She didn't fear that pressure, but Snowy did. Arya tapped her right foot down and shot up into the air before slamming a punch upward. Pure strength. The pressure instantly exploded into pieces before her punch. Once she destroyed the pressure, Arya didn't follow up with another attack and returned to Snowy's side. Xianxia had told her to protect Snowy and keep Snowy absolutely safe, and Nanjing seemed slightly relieved when she witnessed how terrifying Arya's strength was. She wasn't worried about herself. She was worried about Snowy. Fortunately, Arya was very strong. The gray-robed old man stared at Arya and didn't dare to attack. because Arya's foot was still on the one-armed man's chest. So long as he attacked, he was sure that the young girl would stomp apart the man's chest without any hesitation. The one-armed man had an extremely ferocious expression on his face. A grievance. He felt extremely aggrieved. A dignified prince of the desolate had been beaten up like this right after he arrived at eternal border. So, as far as the one-armed man was concerned, it was an extraordinarily terrible humiliation, and he would die if word of it were to spread back to the desolate race. The people of the desolate race could die, but humiliation was out of the option. Are all the people of eternal border so monstrous? Arya ignored the old man and glanced up at the sky. She said, "Snowy, Big Sister N and the others may not be able to last much longer." Snowy pointed at the sky to indicate that she wanted Arya to go help. Arya shook her head. "I have to protect you. Big Brother Yang will become very terrifying if anything happens to you." Actually, Arya was quite afraid of Yang Yi, especially when he went mad. She'd seen him when he was mad, and he was someone who dared to fight anyone. Snowy waved the mirror at Arya to display that she had treasures. Arya shook her head. "No, I must wait until Big Brother Yang returns." Snowy felt quite helpless. Suddenly, a peerlessly terrifying aura came from the distant sky. An instant later, a ray of white light flashed through the sky. Arya frowned slightly and clenched her fists, but she didn't do anything. In the sky, the white light slammed down upon a Nanjing. She'd clearly noticed the white light, so she gave up on pursuing the expert she was fighting and stabbed her spear forward. Meanwhile, a palm pressed against her spear. Bang! An explosion resounded, and then a Nanjing and the martial Qilin were blasted 3 kilometers away. The white light dispersed to reveal a woman in a white dress. Yi Xuehan. It was Yu Xuehan, the founding ancestor of the Immortal estate which Yang Yi had destroyed. After she repulsed a Nanjing, she didn't stop. Her figure shot over to the primal true dragon, and then she overlapped her palms and slammed them down at it. Bang! The primal true dragon was slammed down from the sky, and it only took a short while for it to slam against the ground. In an instant, a huge abyss was blasted open there. A moment later, Yi Xuehan looked at the primal vicious tiger, and then she clawed at it from afar. Bang! The space around the tiger instantly exploded apart, and then the tiger was blasted away. As its figure flew away, blood sprayed from all over its body. Only Oxy remained now. Yu Xuehan ignored Oxy because Oxy was already heavily injured and wasn't worth the waste of time. She gazed at Snowy, and Arya stood before Snowy. Yu Xuehan's gaze was icy cold as she shot down at Snowy. Suddenly, she stopped on the spot and looked to the side. The heavily injured figure of Oxy suddenly shot up into the air, and Oxy swung the primordial axe of creation at her with both hands. A wisp of ridicule arose on the corners of her mouth, and she suddenly vanished on the spot when Oxy was just an inch away from her. Hiss! A ray of cold light pierced through Oxy's stomach, and then his figure instantly stiffened on the spot while Oxy's arms fell from its raised position. Meanwhile, Yi Xuehan didn't stop and slapped her palm against Oxy's back. Bam! Oxy instantly fell to the ground, and his body cracked open inch by inch while blood sprayed. Yi Xuehan still didn't stop and slapped her palm at Oxy from afar. Bang! The space around Oxy instantly exploded apart, and Oxy's body was torn open with it. An instant later, the color in Oxy's eyes gradually dimmed while the axe fell to the ground. Snowy was furious when she witnessed this, and she was about to charge over but was stopped by Arya. Arya just stared at Yi Xuehan while the desire to kill filled her eyes. The desire to kill. A true desire to kill. Snowy pointed at Oxy and cried as she did that. Arya really wanted to help, but the gray-robed old man was still nearby. She couldn't do anything because the old man would act against Snowy if she did. Meanwhile, in Nanjing, Sword Scroll, and Jian Yu were being kept busy by the other experts, so they couldn't help at all. Most importantly, the woman in a white dress had moved her gaze towards Snowy and her. Arya felt helpless. For the first time, she felt quite helpless. She wasn't afraid of being defeated, but this situation wasn't something that could be resolved by just fighting. If she saved one, the other would be lost. Arya held Snowy tight and didn't let her charge over. Meanwhile, the gray-robed old man was itching to make a move, and he was ready to act at a moment's notice. Yi Xuehan placed her hands behind her back and looked down at Snowy while smiling coldly. A sprite progenitor. She was about to attack once she finished speaking, but a pillar of golden light shot up into the air. The primal true dragon. It stood between Yi Xuehan and Snowy while glaring angrily at her with its huge eyes. Yi Xuehan gazed indifferently at the dragon. A pure-blooded primal true dragon. A truly rare sight. If you were in the same realm of cultivation as me, then I would fear you. Unfortunately, you're no different than an ant to me right now. As soon as she finished speaking, she raised her hand gently. In an instant, a powerful wave of pressure swept down from above, and it grew stronger and stronger as it descended. In the end, it converged into a torrent that slammed against the primal true dragon. The primal true dragon's eyes were filled with viciousness, and it roared with fury as it shot up into the air and slammed itself against the pressure. Boom! The sky trembled, and then a miserable howl resounded. It was the primal true dragon. The powerful pressure had instantly blasted apart its scales. The primal true dragon was already severely injured, and now that it had suffered the full strength of Yi Xuehan, it could be said to have suffered a severe injury over an already severely injured body. But it didn't retreat. Not in the slightest. A powerful wave of pressure incessantly rippled through the sky. Since the beginning of the battle, it had never lowered its head. In its lifetime, it had only lowered its head to two, and they were Arya and Snowy. It refused to lower its head, and it refused to retreat. In the sky, the primal true dragon kept slamming itself at Yi Xuehan without the slightest fear of death. However, it was constantly heavily injured instead. Arya stared at the sky. She wanted to help, but she couldn't. She couldn't leave Snowy. Everyone's true objective was Snowy. Snowy was about to charge over, but Arya forcefully kept Snowy from going over. Bang! Suddenly, a colossus crashed down from above. It was the primal true dragon. While it was powerful, the gap in cultivation between it and Yi Xuehan was too huge. It was no match for her. After she dealt with the primal true dragon, Yi Xuehan gazed at Snowy and Arya. Yi Xuehan stared at Snowy's tear-covered face. You're sad? Haha, worse things are coming. I'll kill everyone linked to her. I want all of you to die miserably, including you, sprite progenitor. Others dare not kill you, but I am going to try. As soon as she finished speaking, she charged at Snowy and Arya. Suddenly, the primal true dragon's almost dying figure charged up at her. A wisp of ghastly killing intent flashed through her eyes, and then she grasped her fist in the dragon's direction. Crack! The primal true dragon's head instantly started to crack open, and blood sprayed out like fountains from all over its head. A ferocious smile arose on the corners of Yi Xuehan's mouth. I've never slaughtered a dragon, so I'll try it today. She slowly clenched her right fist as she spoke. Crack! The space in the surroundings shook violently. Crack! The space around Yi Xuehan cracked and warped, and then a powerful wave of force swept down upon the primal true dragon like a surging tide. There was a wisp of sorrow in the primal true dragon's eyes as it gazed at the approaching attack. It turned to glance at Snowy and Arya, and then it closed its eyes slowly. Protect Snowy. Friends. As far as Oxy and the primal true dragon were concerned, Snowy was the sprite progenitor but a friend too, especially the primal true dragon. It had taken Snowy to be its friend since the moment Snowy had given that piece of fruit to it. Friendship. Sometimes, friendship was just that simple. Snowy shook Arya's arm with all her might with the hopes that Arya would save the primal true dragon. Arya stared at the sky. She wanted to save the dragon, but the old man was still targeting her and Snowy. So long as she took action, Snowy would be finished. However, she really wanted to go save the dragon, because if she didn't, the stupid dragon would die. But if she saved the dragon, Snowy may be captured. Arya closed her eyes slowly. Grandpa, what should I do? Suddenly, a sword howl resounded from deep underground, and then a ray of light tore through the ground and shot up into the air. Arya opened her eyes and looked over. She wasn't the only one. Everyone here looked toward the sword hell. A young man had shot up into the clouds, and he was very swift. It took him just an instant to appear before the primal true dragon. Swish! Swish! Two rays of light intersected in the sky, and then Ishuahan's attack was minced into bits. In the sky, Ishuahan's eyes narrowed slightly. Not bad. You're much stronger. This makes things more interesting. Yang Yi glanced at her. Give me some time. That isn't a problem, right? She grinned. Sure. Now that you've shown yourself, I'm certain that woman will too. That woman. Obviously, she was speaking about Xianxia. Being humiliated by Xianxia that day had become a knot in her heart. And if she couldn't undo it, she would never be able to advance further. So, she wasn't here for Snowy today. She was here for Yang Yi and Xianxia. Yang Yi turned around and gazed at the primal true dragon, and his heart hurt. It was horrible. The primal true dragon's body had been completely distorted. Its scales were utterly damaged, and its head had even cracked open. Its injuries were too severe. Could be described as being just a step away from death. Yang Yi walked over to it, touched its horn gently, and spoke softly, "Thank you." Meanwhile, Snowy appeared beside Yang Yi. She hugged Yang Yi and cried for a while, and then she rubbed the primal true dragon's horn gently. Yang Yi waved his right hand and sent the primal true dragon into the primordial pagoda. Once he did that, Yang Yi went underground. Oxy was lying motionlessly there. His aura was very weak, extremely weak. If the primal true dragon was said to be hanging on to one final breath, then Oxy didn't even have half a breath left. Half. Oxy's body was much more inferior when compared to the primal true dragon, so he couldn't endure many attacks from Ishuahan. Snowy immediately started crying upon seeing Oxy. She hugged Yang Ye's neck tightly while her tiny body kept shaking. Yang Yi walked over to Oxy, glanced at the latter, and then his face turned gloomy. Oxy's injuries were probably impossible to heal even with primordial violet energy. Yang Yi seemed to have thought of something and suddenly looked up into the sky. At this moment, a Nanjing was fighting a few Limitbreaker realm experts, and she was severely injured too. It could be said that a Nanjing Jianyu sword scroll and the primal vicious tiger were in a very bad state too. The reason they were still able to hold on was due to the powerful sword formations that sword scroll was controlling. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly and said, "Energy." And Nanjing glanced at Yang Yi from the corner of her eye, and then she tapped a finger in his direction. A strand of white energy immediately entered Yang Ye's body. It was the strand of eternal energy. Yang Yi waved his right hand and sent Oxy into the primordial pagoda, and then he gazed at Snowy. "Go inside and help them." Snowy hurriedly nodded and entered the pagoda. Just primordial violet energy alone wasn't able to save Oxy and the primal true dragon. Perhaps it would be possible if the eternal energy was included too. However, he wasn't certain if it would work, because both of them were really too severely injured. Yang Yi restrained his thoughts and gazed at Arya. "What about you?" Arya glanced at Yang Yi and then she kicked the one-armed man. "That old man said this fellow is from the desolate race, and we can't kill him because of that. Big brother Yang, what do you think?" Yang Yi was about to speak when the old man suddenly said, "Yang Yi. He's the third prince of the desolate race. You?" Yang Yi didn't even spare the old man a glance before he looked up at the sky. "Kill him!" A strange yet ferocious smile arose on Arya's lips, and then she opened her mouth and sucked. Hiss! A wave of suction force swept up the one-armed man and sucked him into her mouth. She'd eaten him alive. Just like that, the one-armed man had been eaten alive. The old man's eyes were filled with horror from the sight of this. Who are you?" Arya burped, and then she gazed at the gray-robed old man. "Old bastard. If it wasn't for you, Oxy and that stupid dragon wouldn't have been injured so seriously. I'm going to eat you alive." Arya stomped her foot down and transformed into a ray of black light that shot at the old man. The tombstone was in her grasp. She arrived above the old man, and then she slammed the tombstone down at him. The old man didn't dare to act carelessly. He clenched both his fists and slammed them upward. Boom! Boom! 2 explosions resounded, and the old man was blasted away. Arya didn't stop attacking, and she charged at the old man. Meanwhile, Yang Yi moved his gaze away, and then he appeared before Yi Xuehan. She glanced at him and said, "You've obtained a divine sword. Not bad, not bad. You're much stronger than before. Come, let me see how monstrous you are." "You?" Her voice stopped abruptly, and then she clawed forward with both hands. She actually caught 2 flying swords. They were Yang Ye's flying swords. They were of no threat to her. Yi Xuehan hurled them, and they instantly transformed into rays of light that shot back at speeds that were even slightly faster than when they shot at her. Yang Ye's expression remained unchanged as he took 2 steps forward. Meanwhile, the sword gourd on his waist trembled slightly, and then the swords were sucked into it. Yang Yi glanced at her. A real 4-world realm expert. Perfect. I too would like to see if I can kill a 4-world realm expert. Yi Xuehan placed her hands behind her back and walked slowly in Yang Ye's direction. The 4-world realm? Haha, ignorant ant. Do you know that I attained the 4-world realm a few hundred years ago? While I'm still not at the 5-world realm yet, but how can you compare an ordinary 4-world realm expert with me? She stopped and continued, Yang Yi, the immortal estate I established was destroyed at your hands. I'll make you pay 100-fold for that. She closed her eyes slowly once she finished speaking, and then the entire world suddenly turned ethereal. The strength she revealed wasn't something eternal border could endure. It was sufficient to destroy the space and all laws in eternal border. Yang Ye's eyes narrowed slightly, and the sword called Executor gradually started to tremble within the sword gourd. Right at this critical moment, Yi Xuehan suddenly opened her eyes, and then she looked up. She seemed to have seen something, causing a ferocious and insane expression to appear on her face. After that, Yang Yi watched with astonishment as her figure vanished on the spot. Yang Yi was stunned. She ran away? She just ran away like that? What the heck? Yang Yi frowned. Quite some time passed before he decided to ignore her since she still hadn't returned, and so he gazed at Nanjing. At this moment, Nanjing was being surrounded by around 8 experts, and she was being pushed back repeatedly. Moreover, she'd suffered quite a few injuries. Yang Yi took a step forward. Hiss! A ray of light flashed through the sky. A 3-world realm expert behind Nanjing was just about to attack when his expression suddenly changed drastically as he turned around. As soon as he did that, a ray of light flashed through his throat. Hiss! His eyes opened wide while astonishment filled them. Fast. Absolutely fast. It was so fast he hadn't been able to react before he died. After he killed that expert, another flying sword flashed, and then the head of another expert flew up into the air on Nanjing's right. Surprise attacks. Yang Yi had instantly taken 2 3-world realm experts by surprise and killed them. At this moment, the experts in the sky moved their attention over to Yang Yi. Yang Yi appeared by Nanjing's side, glanced at her and said, "Can you still fight?" She glanced at him and then she charged at a 3-world realm expert. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly. Kill! Kill until nothing's left. Yang Yi vanished on the spot. At a boundless expanse of the void, Yi Xuehan dashed swiftly, and she was so swift that space collapsed in her wake. A long time passed before she stopped, and a petite young girl stood not too far away. The young girl had her hands behind her back and was looking up at the endless starry sky. Suddenly, the young girl turned around and gazed at Yi Xuehan. "Are you looking for me?" The young girl was none other than Xianxia. Xianxia who'd been gone for so long. Yi Xuehan gazed at Xianxia for a long time before she said, "This isn't your main body." It wasn't Xianxia's main body, and it was just a projection. Couldn't even be considered a clone. Xianxia looked Yi Xuehan in the eyes. "Are you looking for me?" Yi Xuehan refused to display any weakness and met her gaze. "I am." Xianxia nodded. "I'll wait for you by the eternal river." She shot a glance below, and her gaze traveled through space and allowed her to see what she wanted to see. After that, Xianxia's figure gradually turned ethereal. By the eternal river. Ishuahin's eyes narrowed slightly. She naturally knew that place. She hadn't expected Tianxiu to already be there. A long time passed before she opened her eyes, and then Ishuahan vanished into the boundless reaches of space. She was going straight for the eternal river. Once Ishuahan left and Yang Yi joined the battle, the situation was instantly turned around. Rays of sword energy flashed through the clouds from time to time, and every one of them was horrifying to the other experts here. Fear. They felt extreme fear. Since Yang Yi had arrived, every flying sword that left his gourd would take the life of a three-world realm expert. Fortunately, they were on guard now, so it wasn't that easy for Yang Yi to kill them in an instant. However, it truly exhausted their minds, because they had no choice but to keep most of their focus on Yang Yi. Moreover, while they could stop one of Yang Ye's flying swords, the problem was that he had two. Even if they could dodge one, they couldn't dodge two. Hiss! Along with a ray of light that tore through the clouds, the head of a three-world realm expert instantly flew up into the air. Yang Yi was just about to continue his attack when a few limit-breaker realm experts charged at him. Deal with Yang Yi first. Yang Yi remained indifferent as he watched them charge at him. Right when they were just a few meters away, a sword appeared in Yang Ye's grasp. Executor. A moment later, a ray of light flashed. Hiss! Space was instantly obliterated wherever it passed, and the two experts at the front of the group were instantly sliced into two. The remaining limit-breaker realm experts were stunned on the spot. Instant annihilation. They had been instantly killed just like that. Suddenly, two flying swords shot by. The head of a limit-breaker realm expert in front of Yang Yi instantly flew up into the air while accompanied by a pillar of blood. Retreat! Meanwhile, someone shouted, and then the countless experts in the sky fled toward the surroundings. Flee! At this moment, they had no desire to continue fighting because every attack of Yang Ye's could take their lives. How could they fight him? It was impossible. And Nanjing glanced at him. Shall we pursue them? Yang Yi shook his head. Actually, while he'd killed three-world realm experts like dogs earlier, it had been because he'd taken them by surprise in the beginning. Yet now, they were on guard against him, so it was still quite difficult to kill them in an instant. Of course, most importantly, there were many more watching from the shadows. Moreover, and Nanjing, Sword Scroll, Jianyu, and the Primal Vicious Tiger were heavily injured. If the fight continued, it would only end in mutual destruction. He didn't fear that, but he couldn't drag in Nanjing, Sword Scroll, and Jianyu to death with him. That was why he hadn't stopped them from fleeing with the myriad world diagram. It didn't take long for the surroundings to gradually calm down. Yang Yi looked down, and Arya was fighting the gray-robed old man. Yang Yi was about to lend her a hand when Sword Scroll stopped him. Wait a while longer. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment and nodded. At this moment, Arya was slamming the tombstone violently at the gray-robed old man. Strength. Pure strength. Arya's strength was too terrifying. Every single time the tombstone descended, the world around them shook. The gray-robed old man didn't dare to go head-on against her terrifying physical strength. So, he could only passively dodge and defend himself, so it could be said that he was being completely suppressed. Sword Scroll spoke softly by Yang Ye's side. She's angry. Yang Yi nodded. Very angry. Bang. Suddenly, an explosion resounded from afar, and then Yang Yi and the others watched as the gray-robed old man was slammed far away by the tombstone. An instant later, the gray-robed old man was about to flee, but Arya suddenly put down the tombstone and slammed her fist at him from afar. A wave of powerful force swept out from her fist, and it was like an ancient volcano erupting before her. It was extremely terrifying. Boom! The old man was blasted far away. In the end, he crashed into the ground and slammed open a huge hole there. The old man was just about to get up when Arya appeared before him, and then she stomped her foot down on his chest. The old man was utterly immobilized. Arya gazed at the old man, licked her lips, and then opened her mouth and sucked while Yang Yi and the others watched with shock. She sucked the old man into her stomach. Swallowed. He'd been swallowed alive. Sword Scroll and Jianyu had solemn expressions on their faces. Even a Nanjing couldn't help but glance at Arya. She's eating people? Alive too? Yang Yi was shocked too. He only knew that Arya ate demon beasts, but he hadn't expected her to even eat people. She'd eaten him alive. What the heck is she? Meanwhile, Arya walked over to Yang Yi and the others. She glanced at Yang Yi and said, "Big brother Yang, I'm still hungry." Yang Yi was stunned, speechless. Arya suddenly shook her head. "I'll eat later. I'm going to take a look at Oxy and that stupid dragon." She entered the primordial pagoda once she finished speaking. A long period of silence ensued here before Yang Yi gazed at Nanjing, and the latter shook her head slightly. "I'm fine." Yang Yi nodded, and then he waved his hand and sent all of them into the primordial pagoda. In the primordial pagoda, Yang Yi brought all of them to Oxy and the primal true dragon. At this moment, Snowy was treating both of them. With the help of the eternal energy and primordial violet energy, Oxy and the primal true dragon were saved from the brink of death. After all, they were the two best healing energies in the world. Could be said that if it wasn't for them, Oxy and the primal true dragon would really be dead. Even then, both of them weren't in a very good condition. Snowy immediately flew over to Xianxia's shoulder when she saw him, and then she pointed at Oxy and the primal true dragon. Xianxia spoke softly. "It's all right. They'll get better." Snowy nodded, and then she gazed at the primal vicious tiger. The tiger hadn't been targeted by Yi Shui Han, so it was in a much better state. However, Snowy's gaze still had concern in them. The tiger glanced at Snowy and shook its head slightly. "I'm fine. His condition really wasn't that bad. After all, primal demons like it excelled at taking beatings." Yang Yi glanced at the surroundings. Besides him, practically everyone else on his side was heavily injured from the battle. Yang Yi spoke solemnly. "Recuperate well. Leave the rest to me." He gazed at Jian Yu and continued, "Thank you for what you did today." She shook her head, hesitated for a moment and said, "Can I have a look at that sword?" Yang Yi nodded and issued a command in his heart. Executor immediately flashed out of the sword gourd and arrived before Jian Yu. Jian Yu gazed at it for a long time and said, "It's a great sword." She gazed at Yang Yi and continued, "Take care." As soon as she finished speaking, she left the pagoda and transformed into a ray of sword energy that vanished into the sky. In the primordial pagoda, Sword Scroll spoke softly. "She's finally free. I'm certain she'll grow stronger and stronger now." Yang Yi spoke softly. "Because she has no shackles and responsibility anymore, right?" Sword Scroll nodded. "The responsibility that has remained in her clan for generations is finally gone." As she spoke, she gazed at Executor. "I didn't expect this sword to fall into your hands. 3 World Realm experts are practically no threat to you, and even 4 World Realm experts are probably unable to pose a huge threat to you." Yang Yi looked up at the sky. "For World Realm experts are much stronger than I imagined. I'm still too weak." He went to the cultivation room while he spoke. There were 3 swords floating there, the Sword Precursor, the Sword Supreme, and Executor. He'd had a thought while he was recuperating deep underground, and it was to merge them into one. 3 flying swords flying as one. It was actually possible, but when he tried to utilize it earlier, he discovered that he could only merge 2 at most. While Executor could enter the sword gourd, it rejected the sword gourd, and the sword gourd couldn't move it at all. Not only did it reject the sword gourd, it rejected the Sword Precursor and Sword Supreme. As for the Sword Precursor and Sword Supreme, they were unwilling to come into contact with Executor as well. It was because that sword was too powerful, and their consciousnesses would be damaged from just getting close to it. Actually, it wasn't just the 2 swords, even the sword gourd didn't want Executor to enter it. It was too sharp and powerful. In the cultivation room, Yang Yi put Executor aside and gazed at the other 2 swords. Merge them as one. Yang Yi issued a command in his heart, and they immediately entered the sword gourd. A moment later, a ray of light shot out from the sword gourd. A ray of light, but 2 swords. They were like a flash. The attack had grown stronger, but its speed had declined. It was because he had to release 2 swords at once, and it was more mentally taxing than when he released a single sword at a time. However, it wasn't a huge problem for Yang Yi. Train. Train like a madman. So, while Nanjing and the others recuperated, Yang Yi trained like a madman. Just like that, Yang Ye's flying swords grew stronger and stronger, and their speed was increasing as well. Revenge. The moment Nanjing and the others recovered would be the moment he went out in search of revenge. The attack from the experts throughout Eternal Border had heavily injured Nanjing and the others, especially Oxy and the primal true dragon who'd almost died. So, how could he not avenge this? In the primordial pagoda, Nanjing and Sword Scroll were gradually recovering with the help of the primordial violet energy. The most seriously injured Oxy and the primal true dragon had only recovered slightly. This time, Snowy even took out the other half of that fruit she'd obtained from the old man with a bamboo chest, and she split it between the dragon, Oxy, the primal vicious tiger, and Nanjing and the martial Qilin. Even though it was only a small fruit, the demon beasts were extremely excited when they saw Snowy giving it to them. After they ate the fruit, all of them gradually started to undergo changes. Meanwhile, Snowy snuck off to the rear mountains of the Sword Sect. Deep within the bamboo forest there, Snowy went to a certain spot, and there were two small trees there. They weren't very huge, and they were only the size of adults. They were crystalline like they were made from crystals, and their leaves were so similar to crystals that it made them absolutely gorgeous. Both of the trees had two thumb-sized little fruits. The chaotic fruits. They were all chaotic fruits. If people knew that these 4 fruits existed, the consequences would be unimaginable. Just as Wu and I had said, there were no more than 5 such fruits in the world. But Snowy had for here right now. Moreover, it was obvious she would have more in the future. These 2 trees were the trees Snowy had planted with the seeds from the 2 fruits. Of course, they were only able to grow because of Snowy. Since the day she obtained them, Snowy had used Sprite Ascension on them every day, and she even nurtured them with primordial violet energy and the eternal energy. Under such circumstances, they gradually sprouted and grew, and they even started bearing fruit. All of this made Snowy feel overjoyed. So, she worked even harder. The tree was growing, and so were the fruits. The chaotic fruit tree. Actually, they were mainly able to grow because of Snowy, the sprite progenitor. If it wasn't for Snowy, even the old man with the bamboo chest wouldn't be able to make them grow. Actually, it wasn't just the old man, no other person would have the ability to make them grow. Only an existence like Snowy who could strengthen the spirit was able to nurture these seeds into trees. Snowy touched the trees gently, and then blew lightly. In an instant, countless strands of spirit energy surged toward them, and so did an endless stream of primordial violet energy. Besides that, Snowy summoned the eternal energy, and it coiled around the trees. The trees immediately started trembling when it appeared. As for the tiny fruits, they seemed to have grown slightly. Snowy's eyes lit up, and she continued blowing out spirit energy. Suddenly, Arya appeared by Snowy's side. She glanced at the trees and asked, "Snowy, can I eat them?" She licked her lips as she spoke. Snowy glanced at Arya, and then Snowy shook her head and waved her paws. She was saying that they had to grow bigger. Arya had no choice but to nod, because she too felt that they were too small and wouldn't be satisfying. Just like that, a long time passed before Snowy seemed to be quite tired. She patted her paws together and pranced off into the distance. Once Snowy left, Sword Scroll appeared before the trees. She gazed at them for a long time and spoke softly. The chaotic fruit tree. If they appear in the eternal universe, countless demon overlords would go crazy over them. She shook her head. What a monster! She vanished on the spot. At a point in the clouds, Yang Yi closed his eyes, and his aura was restrained within him, while he seemed to have merged into one with the world. Suddenly, a sword howl resounded, and then a ray of light shot through the clouds. A cloud suddenly exploded apart far away in the distance. The light dispersed, and 2 swords floated soundlessly there. They were overlapped against each other, and they were red and gold. Suddenly, the 2 swords transformed into rays of light and vanished. An instant later, the sword gourd on Yang Ye's waist shook, and then a ray of sword energy shot out from it. After that, a ray of sword energy flew to the left while another flew to the right. 2 flying swords in 2 different directions. The 2 swords flew side by side in the air, sometimes intersecting, sometimes flying in parallel. Just like that, the sky was filled with rays of light. Xianxia's flying swords were much stronger than they had been in the past, especially when the swords overlapped with each other. Their combined might could kill a 3-world realm expert with ease, even if that expert was vigilant toward his attacks. He was confident in being able to accomplish that now. But his true trump card wasn't the flying swords but the sword domain. The sword domain combined with Executor. He could swing his sword 4 times with the sword domain now, and he could do it 5 times if he was desperate. However, he wouldn't rashly swing his sword 5 times with the sword domain. When he did that, it could be considered as trying to take his enemy down with him, and so it would only be used in a truly hopeless situation. Now, when he executed 4 swings with Executor, it could be said that he was even able to kill 4 World Realm experts. As for 3 World Realm experts, they were probably incapable of resisting just a single swing. When Xianxia held the sword, he truly sensed how terrifying it was. It was a sword that had surpassed the scope of swords. Couldn't be judged as a normal sword anymore. As for the Sword Precursor and Sword Supreme, they had their own objectives after seeing Executor, or it should be said that they had a direction now. Xianxia put the swords away, and Executor appeared in his grasp. Even the primordial pagoda wasn't willing to let it stay within the pagoda by itself. It executed the spirit. To a certain extent, it possessed Snowy's ability. However, it only possessed Snowy's destructive ability and not the ability to improve the spirit of others. Moreover, its destructive ability wasn't as destructive as Snowy's. Of course, it was in comparison to Snowy's future ability. Snowy's present ability was inferior to the sword. Once Snowy became a sprite progenitor, she could destroy any spirit or sprite with a single thought. Of course, she could help them too. Xianxia glanced at the sword in his grasp and vanished on the spot. At the rear mountains of the sword sect, Xianxia went to where Oxy was at. Oxy could move now, but he wasn't healed yet. Snowy was here too. Her eyes lit up when she saw Xianxia, and then she flew over to his shoulder and rubbed her head lightly against his shoulder. Xianxia rubbed her head and gazed at Oxy. The latter nodded to Xianxia. Oxy was quite respectful to Xianxia. Not just because of Snowy, but because Xianxia was extremely strong too. The strong were always respected no matter where they went. Xianxia walked over to Oxy and patted the latter on the shoulder. "How do you feel?" Oxy hadn't even spoken when Snowy started waving her paws. Xianxia smiled. "It's good that he's doing much better." Snowy flew over to Oxy's head and patted the dragon horn on Oxy's head. She was telling Oxy to just recuperate and not do anything else. Oxy naturally wouldn't refuse her and quickly nodded. Snowy cracked a smile and flew over to Xianxia's shoulder. Xianxia smiled. "Recuperate well. We'll fight together later." Oxy nodded and waved his fist at Xianxia. Xianxia chuckled and left with Snowy. Xianxia took Snowy to Aria's hall. At this moment, Aria was seated cross-legged in there, and she blinked but didn't stand up when she saw them. Suddenly, Snowy flew over to her and touched Aria's head. The pair of black horns had grown quite a bit. They had just been a small bump before this, but they were the size of tiny fists now. Snowy curiously touched them while curiosity filled her eyes. Aria's figure stiffened slightly when Snowy touched them, but it didn't take long for her to return to normal. Actually, Snowy wasn't aware that those horns couldn't be just touched. Of course, based on her relationship with Aria, it wouldn't be a problem even if Snowy kept rubbing them. Xianxia glanced at the horns and asked, "Aria, what are those?" Aria shook her head. "I don't know. In any case, they grew a little after I ate 2 people." She gazed at Xianxia, blinked and continued, "Big brother Yang." Xianxia asked, "What are you trying to say?" She hesitated for quite some time and said, "I think you'll definitely be very tasty." Xianxia was stunned speechless. Snowy was stunned, and then she hurriedly shook her head. She pointed at Xianxia to say that she couldn't eat him. Aria cracked a smile. "I won't eat him. Moreover, Big Brother Yang is very strong, and I don't think I can defeat him." Xianxia was quite speechless. She couldn't defeat him? If she could, then wouldn't she try to eat him? Xianxia shook his head and said, "Aria, Have you grown stronger? Arya nodded. I'm very strong. Xianxia smiled. I see. He hesitated for a moment and asked, Arya, you ate both of them? She blinked. Can't I? Xianxia hesitated for a moment and asked, were they tasty? Arya licked her lips. They weren't bad. Right, Snowy, you can try it. Maybe you'll like it too. Snowy blinked and nodded to indicate that she could give it a try next time. Meanwhile, Xianxia slapped Snowy on the butt. No eating people. Snowy gazed at Xianxia to ask why. Xianxia said, They aren't tasty. They aren't bad. Arya suddenly explained, They didn't taste bad to me. Snowy gazed at Xianxia and pointed at Arya. Xianxia glared at Arya. Arya, you can eat people, but you must not teach Snowy to do that. Understand? Arya puckered her lips. Big brother Yang. Why are people allowed to eat demon beasts, but demon beasts aren't allowed to eat people? Xianxia pointed at Snowy. She isn't a demon beast. Meanwhile, Snowy pointed at herself to say that she could be one. Xianxia felt speechless. Suddenly, Arya looked up at the sky. My dream is to eat everything I can eat in this world. Snowy blinked, and then she waved her paws swiftly. She was saying that she wanted treasures. All the treasures in the world belonged to her. Xianxia was stunned. What a pair of rascals. Xianxia left the two little rascals and went to the ascension platform. Xianxia looked up at the clouds and felt a little lost. Very lost, actually. Suddenly, a woman in a white dress appeared by his side. She gently embraced his arm and spoke softly. What's wrong? Xianxia gazed at the peerlessly gorgeous face by his side. Xianxia. Xianxia kissed her gently on the forehead and replied, Xianxia. While I cultivated in the last 2 days, I've been thinking, constantly thinking. She asked softly, About what? Xianxia looked up at the sky. Since I started cultivating on profounder continent, I've been killing my way all the way until now. Killing, constantly killing. Either I get killed or I kill. So, I've been thinking, when will this killing ever stop? Xianxia fell silent because she couldn't answer that question. Xianxia shook his head and smiled. In the beginning, my objective was to protect my mother and sister, but reality was just cruel. The more I wanted that, the more difficult it was to achieve. I've killed many all along the way, a huge number of people, and I still have to kill more once I go outside. I have to continue killing. Tell me, when will I ever stop killing? Do I really have to kill until the day I become unmatched? Xianxia still remained silent. Killing. Xianxia smiled and said, I've really killed too. Too many in my lifetime. My entire life has been spent killing, and I don't like killing. It is quite laughable to say this. A person who doesn't like killing is constantly killing. He looked up at the distant sky and continued, But what can I do? If I don't kill them, they will kill me. Meanwhile, Xianxia spoke softly, I just want you to be safe and well. Safe and well. Suddenly, an icy cold voice came from afar. Xianxia turned to look, and he saw Sword Scroll. Sword Scroll walked over to Xianxia and looked him in the eye. I have to say that some of your thoughts are foolish, very foolish. Xianxia gazed at her and waited for her to continue. Sword Scroll took another step forward. At this moment, she was very close to Xianxia. She looked him in the eye. Do you know that my previous master once said that the birth of all things, including people, was a form of cultivation? Since the moment we arrive in this world, our path of cultivation has already begun. She shook her head. Do you know what the survival of the fittest means? Xianxia asked. Please do explain. She said, Just think about it. Since you started your journey in the first world you were born in, how many people are gone now? Xianxia's hands trembled slightly. How many? How many were gone? Not to mention anywhere else, just on profound continent. He'd lost his mother, Elder Mu, Qin Bufan Inwaner, Zir's father, the emperor of the Grand Qin Empire. Besides that, there were many other places and worlds that he'd been through. How many were gone? Too many. All of them were gone. Sword Scroll spoke softly. The world is cruel and realistic. The strong go further and further, and the weak are eliminated. Just like countless sword techniques, fist techniques, and laws you once used. Why don't you use them now? Because they aren't strong enough. When they aren't strong enough, they are eliminated by you. You're a realistic person, let alone this world. The weak were useless. Xianxia laughed bitterly. So I'm a person like that too. Meanwhile, Sword Scroll continued. Of course, that isn't wrong. Everyone must go higher and further. Those who speak about enjoying an ordinary life are actually just willingly allowing themselves to fall, and they are useless people. An ordinary life is mostly lived due to having no other choice. Only those who have stood at the peak have the right to speak about living ordinary lives, because they've obtained everything they should. But some people don't really want to live ordinary lives. They are forced to, because they don't have the ability to change their own lives and allow themselves to live extraordinary lives. She laughed bitterly at this point. Xianxia, life shouldn't be lived in mediocrity. We cultivators have lives that are much longer than ordinary people, but they are very short lives to us. It's best to fight while you're still alive. Because if you don't— She gazed at Xianxia at this point and smiled. Allow me to be honest for a while longer. If you're a weakling, if you're an idiot, then would she like you? Would any of your drop-dead gorgeous women look at you seriously? Of course, if you became an ordinary person now, I'm sure they would still stay with you. But if you were a useless ordinary person from the very beginning, I'm sure nothing would have started between you. Xianxia fell silent. Was Sword Scroll wrong? Actually, she wasn't. If he was a useless piece of trash, would gorgeous geniuses like Xianxia and Xiaoyushi even like him? They definitely wouldn't. Or even if they did like him, he wouldn't have the ability to protect them. There was emotion, love, and loyalty in life, but the precondition to it all may be built upon a person's own strength and ability. If a man was poor, would a woman fall for him? Would anyone be willing to be that person's friend? To be a little blunter, if you had money, everything would be open to you. But if you had no money, everyone would fucking look down on you. Sword Scroll walked over to the side and looked up at the sky. Besides that, cultivation is fighting against others for resources and karmic luck. But it doesn't end there, you have to fight the heavens for lifespan and destiny. On this path of cultivation, many die while fighting others, and others die while fighting the heavens. She gazed at Xianxia and continued, if you don't fight for yourself and try to seek an ordinary life, then not only will others come for your life, the heavens will too. Your life belongs to the heavens, and if you want to extend it, then you must cultivate. If you cultivate, then you must fight the heavens. Otherwise, you will gradually be eliminated from the world, just like the friends you had in the past. Xianxia looked down at the sword in his grasp. Fight. At this moment, he gained a slight understanding. Simply speaking, it was like during the time he was a labor disciple in the sword sect. If he hadn't fought for it, he may have been a labor disciple forever. Fight. Xianxia suddenly smiled. There are a myriad types of grandass, and I, Xianxia, will use my sword Dao to fight for it. Boom! As soon as he said that, a wave of powerful sword intent swept out from within him. Sword intent. In an instant, Xianxia's sword intent rose madly like an erupting volcano. On the ascension platform, Sword Scroll spoke softly. The most difficult to cultivate is the sword, but the easiest to cultivate is the sword as well. Cultivation was easiest for sword cultivators because they cultivated the heart. The stronger the heart, the stronger their sword would be. If the mind was clear, the sword Dao would be smooth. But it was also most difficult because if the mind wasn't clear, the sword Dao would be obstructed. On the ascension platform, Xianxia's sword intent was rising madly. The reason for that wasn't just his cleared mind, it was because he wasn't lost anymore. He'd found a new direction for his sword Dao, and it was to fight. In the past, he'd been fighting passively, but now he planned to do it actively. Fight to the peak of the sword Dao, and fight until he was invincible. Suddenly, Xianxia's sword intent surged back into his body like a receding tide. The sword in Xianxia's grasp shook violently, and then a ray of light shot up into the clouds. The World Lord Realm. His cleared mind had allowed his sword intent to instantly attain the World Lord Realm. The improvement in his sword intent represented that his flying swords and sword domain would be improved tremendously. Meanwhile, Sword Scroll suddenly said, "If you stop suppressing yourself now, how high would your cultivation go?" Yang Yi gazed at her and smiled. "I don't know." He really didn't. He was constantly suppressing his cultivation, and if he stopped that and allowed it to rise, then he really didn't know where it would stop. She glanced at him and nodded. "I look forward to the day you stop." Yang Yi chuckled, and then he took Su Qingshi in his arms and vanished on the spot. In the primordial pagoda, Yang Yi accompanied Su Qingshi and the others for 2 days. They were cultivating two now, or it should be said that they'd always been. Just as Sword Scroll had said, they didn't want to be eliminated by the world. Who didn't want to live a while longer? They wanted to live longer too and stay with Yang Yi for a while longer. 2 days later, Yang Yi left the primordial pagoda with Snowy. He was a little afraid of Arya now. She kept trying to make Snowy eat people whenever she was with Snowy, and she was even trying to teach Snowy how to eat demon beasts. As for the little fellow, she really wanted to give it a try. That made Yang Yi have quite the headache. In the sky above the sword ruins, Yang Yi glanced at the surroundings and was about to leave. However, a gray-robed old man suddenly appeared nearby. The old man's dressing was familiar to Yang Yi because it was similar to the old man from the desolate race whom Arya had swallowed the other day. Peak 3 World Realm Expert. The old man glanced at Yang Yi, and then he flicked a golden card over to Yang Yi. There was a tiny character on it. Yang Yi frowned slightly. "What's the meaning of this?" The old man explained indifferently. "Our 7th prince would like to meet you. I'm sure you'll give us face and come, right?" Yang Yi glanced at the old man and flicked the card back to him. "I don't have a good impression of your race, so I refuse to give you face." Yang Yi turned around and was about to leave. However, the old man suddenly said, "If you don't give my prince face, then my prince may not give you face. Right? I forgot to tell you that he's a guest in White Emperor City right now. If you don't go, then—" A sword howl suddenly resounded. A moment later, Yang Yi was in front of the old man, and then Executor left its sheath. The sword swept forward horizontally. 3 swings with the sword domain. The world shook before it and turned ethereal. The old man's expression changed drastically. At this moment, he used all the strength he had. But Yang Yi sheathed his sword. The old man's eyes were still wide open as Yang Yi placed his hand on it and said, "All right, I'll give him face. But lend me your head." As soon as he finished speaking, he lifted the head lightly, and he just lifted it off the old man's neck. Just like that, Yang Yi had a sword in one hand and a head in the other as he traveled to White Emperor City. Favorite, after Yang Yi left, a woman appeared there in the sky above the sword ruins. It was Nanli Meng. She gazed at the sky with a solemn expression on her face. The old man was at least a Peak 3 World Realm expert, but such an expert hadn't even been able to resist a single attack from Yang Yi. Not even one. How strong was Yang Yi? Nanli Meng didn't know the answer. A long time passed before Nanli Meng shook her head. A calamity for eternal border. She turned around and left. She knew Yang Ye's temper well. He was an absolutely ruthless person, and he was ruthless to the bone. If someone was good to him, he would never forget it, but if someone was bad to him, he would never forget it as well. Fortunately, the Nanli clan hadn't participated in any of this. White Emperor City. A young man was seated on the ground outside the city, and a round table was before him. There was a jug and 2 wine cups on it. The young man was the 7th prince of the desolate race, Huang Yan. Suddenly, Huang Yan looked up into the sky. A ray of cold light flashed there, and then a man in green clothes appeared not too far away from him. The man in green clothes had a sword in his right hand and a bloody head in his left. Huang Yan's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw the head. Yang Yi walked over to the young man and tossed the head over. "I heard you wanted to see me. It's not my style to come empty-handed, so I brought you a little gift. Do you like it?" Huang Yan glanced at the head and smiled. "You're too kind. There's no need for a gift. However, reciprocating is a must, so I'll give you a gift too." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his right hand at the city. In an instant, a huge ethereal palm appeared in the sky above the city, and then it crashed down. If it descended, the entire city would be obliterated. Suddenly, a ray of sword energy shot at the palm. However, Huang Yan immediately swung a punch when it appeared. Bam! The sword energy was forced to a stop. Huang Yan grinned. Brother Yang, you should accept this gift. The huge palm above the city was descending, but just an instant later, it exploded apart and was obliterated. Flying swords. More than one of them. Huang Yan glanced at the sword gourd by Yang Ye's waist. A pretty good treasure. And you use it well. Yang Yi sat down before him. You're the 7th prince, and Area 8 a 3rd prince. I'm quite curious. How many princes are there? Huang Yan smiled. There are 37. However, only 9 came this time. Of course, only 8 remain now. Yang Yi shook his head slightly. You're mistaken. Huang Yan was puzzled. Huh. Yang Yi didn't say a word and just swung his sword. A sword howl resounded through the sky, and just the sword howl tore the sky apart. Huang Yan's expression had instantly changed when Yang Yi drew his sword. Horror. That was what Huang Yan felt right now. At the instant Yang Yi drew his sword, Huang Yan knew that he'd terribly underestimated this man who had the sprite progenitor. This attack wasn't something a 3-world realm expert could resist. While he was horrified, his reaction wasn't slow at all. At the instant Yang Yi swung his sword, a black lotus had suddenly bloomed from within Huang Yan, and then it instantly closed and enveloped him within it. A pseudo-divine treasure. The black lotus was a defensive pseudo-divine treasure. Moreover, it had been given a seal by the experts of the desolate race. So, when the seal was included, even if it couldn't compare to a divine treasure, it wasn't far off. So, Huang Yan was very confident in it. However, he didn't know what kind of existence the sword in Yang Ye's grasp was. The sword descended. Hiss! Yang Ye's sword didn't even stop for a moment before the black lotus exploded apart, and then Yang Ye's sword sliced straight through Huang Yan. Huang Yan's figure instantly stiffened, and he gazed at Yang Yi with a blank look in his eyes. That sword? Yang Yi grinned. Executor! Yang Yi turned around and walked away once he finished speaking. Huang Yan's figure suddenly split open, and then blood and internal organs sprayed all over the ground. He was dead. After he killed Huang Yan, Yang Yi suddenly shot up into the sky. It didn't take long for him to arrive high above, and numerous powerful auras were shooting off into the distance. They were fleeing. They were the experts of Eternal Border who were watching from afar, and they'd decisively chosen to flee once Yang Yi noticed their presence. However, Yang Yi didn't spare them. 2 flying swords shot through space. Hiss! Hiss! Along with 2 sounds of something being sliced open, 2 heads flew up into the air in the distance, and then blood rained down from above. Instant kills. Both swords had instantly killed a 3-world realm expert each. Yang Yi turned around. There was one last 3-world realm expert fleeing madly in the distance. Yang Yi withdrew his gaze and issued a command in his heart. A flying sword instantly appeared there. Hiss! Everywhere the sword passed, space was instantly sliced into bits. That expert in the distance seemed to have sensed the sword, and a wisp of bitterness arose on his lips. He stopped on the spot and closed his eyes. He couldn't defend himself against it at all. As soon as he sensed it, he knew that he was done for. Suddenly, a black ray of light slammed against the sword. Bang! An explosion resounded, and then the ray of light dispersed while the sword itself was blasted away. Yang Yi glanced to the right, and a middle-aged man was looking at him from there. The initial emperor. The middle-aged man was the Xiwan clan's initial emperor. Initial emperor gazed coldly at Yang Yi in silence. Yang Yi grinned. He was about to attack when initial emperor suddenly attacked. A wave of powerful fist intent swept at Yang Yi like a storm. Moreover, numerous powerful auras appeared around Yang Yi, and these auras rapidly slammed down at Yang Yi. Yang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. He drew his sword and swung it. Hiss! A ray of light swept out with Yang Yi at its center, and it instantly sliced apart those auras. However, initial emperor and the others had vanished. The ancestors of the 5 clans. They hadn't chosen to fight Yang Yi to the death, and they'd chosen to avoid him instead. They had no choice. Yang Ye's strength was too terrifying. Even they didn't dare to fight him to the death because even if they won in the end, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. Once that happened, it would only benefit someone else. So, they chose to avoid him. Yang Yi glanced at the surroundings, fell silent for a moment, and then vanished on the spot. Around an hour later, Yang Yi arrived at the Nanli clan, and Nanli Meng immediately appeared before him. Nanli Meng sized up Yang Yi and smiled. "Congratulations! Now, very few throughout Eternal Border dare to offend you." Yang Yi grinned. "Miss Nanli, long time no see." She chuckled. "Go on. Tell me why you're here." Yang Yi looked her in the eyes. "The guardians, the ancestors of the 5 clans, and those fellows who fled from the sword ruins that day. I want to know where they are." Nanli Meng fell silent. Yang Yi smiled. "You can't tell me?" She smiled. "Brother Yang, you're putting me in a difficult position." Yang Yi thought for a moment and said, "I'll owe you a favor, all right?" "Favor." Nanli Meng fell silent. Yang Yi wasn't the same person he used to be, so a favor from him was quite valuable. It should be described as being very valuable. However, she shook her head. "Brother Yang, I can't pick a side this time. My Nanli clan is staying out of this." "I'm sorry." Yang Yi glanced at her and nodded. "All right, I understand." He turned around and walked away. Suddenly, Nanli Meng said, "Brother Yang." Yang Yi stopped and gazed at her. She hesitated for a moment and smiled. "The Abyss World, Xiao Xinwu, Xian Xiao, Wan Wei Hu, the Desolate Race, and the D-Clan. Watch out for them. Good luck." She turned around and left. Yang Yi repeated those names in his heart and said, "Thank you." Yang Ye's figure transformed into a ray of light that vanished into the sky. Meanwhile, down below, Nanli Meng glanced at the sky, and no one knew what she was thinking. Meanwhile, a beautiful woman appeared by her side. It was the ancestor of the Nanli clan, Nanli Yin. Nanli Yin spoke indifferently. "You still took his side in the end." She smiled. "I just helped a little." Nanli Yin spoke solemnly. "It may bring calamity to our clan." Nanli Meng glanced at her. "Don't worry. I'll protect the clan." She grinned, and then she vanished into the distance. Nanli Yin remained silent on the spot. Myriad World Mountain. One of the teleportation formations here trembled, and then a young man in a white robe walked out from within it. The man glanced at the surroundings, and then he looked up at the sky. He closed his eyes slowly, and a long time passed before he grinned. "It is the aura of a sprite progenitor. Interesting." As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings. Eternal Border. I wonder how many people here still remember me. Xiao Shunwu. Ha ha ha. The Abyss World. The Abyss World was actually an abyss, a huge abyss. It was an abyss that formed a small world. Because it was too big and unique, the world named it Abyss World. It was a world of its own. The Abyss World hadn't been a world in the beginning, and it had just been an expanse of space. But because of a huge battle, it had been blasted open into an endless abyss, and ordinary experts didn't dare to step foot into it. It was one of the few forbidden areas in the universe. Suddenly, numerous auras entered the Abyss World. Deep within the Abyss World, the bottom of it, in fact, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared there. It was the Xiwan clan's initial emperor. The middle-aged man glanced at the surroundings, and then 4 people appeared there. They were the ancestors of the other 4 clans, Beichuan Xiu, Han Yuan Ting, Luoli Ming, and Yigo. The ancestors of all 5 clans were here. They were being led by the initial emperor. Initial emperor suddenly looked to the right. "Please show yourselves." As soon as he said that, the space there trembled slightly, and then 4 experts appeared there. 3 world realm experts. There were 3 men and a woman, and all of them were at the 3 world realm. Initial emperor nodded slightly to them, and then he looked up into the sky. "Elder Qing, please join us too." Once initial emperor said that, an old man in a green robe appeared not too far away from him. The expressions of everyone here turned quite solemn from the sight of him. Elder Qing, or also known as Qing Xing. He was the strongest among the guardians. a true four-world realm expert. Moreover, he'd been at the four-world realm for many years. Could be said that Elder Qing was the strongest and most influential guardian. Initial Emperor cupped his fist at Qing Xing while he said, "I didn't expect you to come yourself, Elder Qing." Qing Xing glanced at the people here. "Are all of you here for Yang Yi or the Desolate Race?" They exchanged glances. In the end, Initial Emperor spoke solemnly, "The Desolate Race. The Desolate Race." Many people in Eternal Border knew nothing about the Desolate Race. But they did. All those years ago, the Desolate Race had almost annihilated Eternal Border. If it wasn't for the sprite progenitor joining the battle, Eternal Border would have ceased to exist by now. Now that the Desolate Race was back, it would be a lie if they said that they weren't worried. What was the Desolate Race's attitude toward Eternal Border? Obviously, it was definitely not friendly. After all, Eternal Border had taken Eternal Kingdom's side all those years ago. Qing Xing nodded slightly when he heard Initial Emperor. The Desolate Race is back, and it proves that they have recovered. Based on the way they do things, they will definitely seek revenge. So, Eternal Border is in danger. Eternal Border is in danger. Qing Xing continued. According to my knowledge, Eternal Border only has 6 experts who are truly at the four-world realm. I'm one of them. The Immortal Estate's Yi Shuihan is another. Unfortunately, her whereabouts are unknown. Besides us, there's Xiao Xinwu, Xianxia, Wan Weihu, and Mr. Yin Yang. He gazed at them and continued, all of you ancestors of the 6 clans, and those ancestors of Sword Sky City, White Emperor City, and the 3 sects are only at the peak of the 3-world realm. You're all just a step away from the 4-world realm. Our forces have no chance against the Desolate Race. Yigo suddenly said, if we have no chance, then we should stay out of it. Stay out of it. Everyone gazed at him in silence. Yigo spoke indifferently. Don't tell me all of you plan to protect Eternal Border to your deaths? You must be joking. Those fellows only took Eternal Kingdom's side because Eternal Kingdom promised them many things, and so did the sprite progenitor. They fought a bloody battle not for this place, but for themselves. Right? For themselves. Only themselves remained in the hearts of experts at their level. It was the grand Tao and eternal life that they cared about. They could abandon everything for that. Just like this very moment, if there was no benefit, it would be absolutely impossible to make them join forces against the Desolate Race. They could join forces against Yang Yi because of the sprite progenitor, and killing Yang Yi would benefit them tremendously. But what about the Desolate Race? They would get nothing, and they may die as well. So, they naturally refused to do something like that. Meanwhile, Elder Qing suddenly said, how can any of us survive if this place is destroyed? Yigo glanced at him. The Desolate Race's true objective is the Eternal Kingdom, so let's just watch and see what happens, and we can take advantage of the situation when the time comes. Elder Qing shook his head slightly. You think too little of the Desolate Race. When they truly come to Eternal Border, we must either surrender or die. Yigo fell silent. The final goal of these people from Eternal Border was the Eternal Kingdom and entering the Eternal Kingdom. As for the Desolate Race, their objective was to enter the Eternal Kingdom too. So, it should be said that they had the same objective. Unfortunately, the Desolate Race looked upon Eternal Border with disdain all those years ago, and it planned to keep Eternal Kingdom for itself. Otherwise, if it had gathered the strength of the experts from Eternal Border, Eternal Kingdom wouldn't have been able to fight back at all. Suddenly, Elder Qing looked to the right, and then the others looked in that direction too. A young man in a violet robe was walking over slowly from that direction. Behind the young man was a middle-aged man who held a sword in his arms while keeping his head lowered slightly. The young man walked over to them and grinned. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Huang Yi. They call me Sixth Prince. He had the surname of the Desolate Race. The others frowned, and there was some vigilance in their eyes. Huang Yi grinned. I heard that you seem to be discussing my Desolate Race. Come on. I'll discuss it with you. Elder Qing glanced at the middle-aged man before Huang Yi and asked, what do you wish to discuss? Huang Yi smiled. Your future. He glanced at everyone here and said, your objective is the Eternal Kingdom, and our objective is the same. However, all of you can't get in there, but I can, and I can take all of you with me." They remained silent. Huang Yi smiled. "This is an opportunity for all of you, and it may be your last opportunity. Oh, right, if you're planning on taking advantage of the situation at the end, then just forget it. Both my desolate race and eternal kingdom aren't existences that all of you can fight." Yigo spoke coldly. "You just want us to be your slaves, right?" Huang Yi shook his head. "That makes it sound so terrible. If you're willing to follow me, then you'll be friends of the desolate race, and I—" "Friends?" Yigo laughed coldly. "How truly laughable, you." His expression suddenly changed drastically at this point. An array of sword energy appeared before him. It was fast. Hiss! Along with a strand of blood, an arm fell to the ground. It was Yigo's arm, while Yigo himself was over 1 kilometer away with a pale countenance covered in shock. The middle-aged man behind Huang Yi looked up and glanced at Yigo. Servants should not interrupt their masters. Everyone gazed at the middle-aged man, and their eyes were filled with fear and seriousness. A 4-world realm expert. The middle-aged sword cultivator was a 4-world realm expert. Huang Yi grinned. "I forgot to introduce him. This is a friend I just made, Xianxia. He was a guardian of the Northern Sword Sect. My desolate race has great, very great ambitions. If I'm to be frank, I'm only here because your strengths are barely sufficient, or if I'm to be direct, you're not absolutely beneath me." Their expressions became quite unsightly when they heard this. However, Huang Yi ignored their displeasure and continued. "If you don't believe me, just see how you'll be ants who are used as cannon fodder soon." He turned around and walked away. Suddenly, Initial Emperor spoke. "Wait a minute." Huang Yi stopped and gazed at Initial Emperor, and the latter fell silent for a moment before he said, "I'd like to seek guidance from you." Huang Yi grinned. "All right." Huang Ye's figure shook and vanished on the spot. Hiss! 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 Suddenly, the space between Huang Yi and Initial Emperor was torn open. Bang! An explosion resounded, and then a figure was blasted far away. It was Initial Emperor. Once he stopped himself, a spear pressed against his forehead. However, as soon as that happened, the spear shook violently and was blasted away by a wave of mysterious energy. A wisp of surprise flashed through Huang Ye's eyes. Interesting. Initial Emperor wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth and walked over to Huang Yi, and then he bowed slightly. "I'm willing to follow you." Everyone here was shocked. "He's submitting just like that? Ha ha!" Huang Yi suddenly roared with laughter, and he laughed for a while before he gazed at Initial Emperor. "Very good, you're not blind. Ha ha!" He flicked a thumb-sized white pearl over to Initial Emperor. "A world energy pill can help you attain the 4-world realm. It's yours." He turned around and walked off once he finished speaking. The middle-aged man, Xianxia, glanced at Initial Emperor. "The young master went through hell just to get 3 of those in the last few decades." He turned around and left. Initial Emperor glanced at the white pearl, and then he looked up at Huang Ye's figure and spoke softly. "One of the 10 great physiques.